All right, AP Hug. Got all my problems fixed. Well, I mean, the problems on this screen. Don't worry, I have plenty of other problems, but at least I have this slideshow fixed. All right, I'm just going to make part four be the final chapter, and I'll just run through the rest of these notes. And so whether we end up able to go through some of them class or not, doesn't matter because we'll have them on video here. I'm probably going to do something very similar when I do my quick run through Unit 7. So yeah, is what it is. All right, so here we go. Um, Political issues in cities, section 3, as we continue through our little tour of issues in cities. Political, this might kind of sound kind of like a weird jump to go from, political issues to, well, public transportation. But a lot of political issues do come out of what people spend money on, and especially tax dollars. Cities collect taxes from their citizens, and transportation is a biggie in terms of what that money is spent on. You can also look at things like public safety, police, fire, all that. But public transportation is a biggie, especially the bigger the city is. And so, yeah, you got some examples there of what we're talking about when we refer to public transportation. Um, Usually why you'll see an urban area or city begin to spend money on public transportation. A lot of it does have to do with people who maybe are reporting less and less satisfaction with life because they're spending more and more time sitting in traffic. And then just the pollution that comes from the fact that the vast majority of the vehicles here in the United States and other countries, are still traditional, good old petroleum burning engines that even with the best emissions controls that we have on them, still ultimately do create pollution. And so those are a couple of the major drivers towards trying to get people out of their own cars and into public transportation. And in a lot of different parts of the world, countries have had varying levels of success with this. The United States, we are in the number 12 spot globally when it comes to making best use of public transportation. One of the issues that a lot of experts talk about is just how big our country is, and how often our sheer size makes public transportation a little more problematic than smaller countries that are able to invest and cover most of their country with a modest expenditure of basically tax dollars to create public transportation infrastructure and transportation systems. With us, you can look at some of our big cities. Washington D.C. comes to mind. They've got a big system. New York, San Francisco. Some of our big cities have fairly good subway systems, light rail systems. But overall, as a country, we definitely kind of lag behind a lot of other parts of the world. Okay, I made use of that infrastructure word and B, another issue, because again, money. Yes, infrastructure is a big one. Building roads, repairing roads, making sure that bridges are being maintained so that they don't go down. Like I mentioned before, paying for law enforcement and fire safety and EMTs, all that sort of thing. Making sure that the water that comes out of our faucets is safe to drink. Making sure that we have electricity even in rough weather. Making sure that when we flush the toilet that goes down where it's supposed to go. And garbage pickup, all these, I could keep on going. All these make up part of city infrastructure, and all of them cost money. And so, when we are paying taxes, whether it's income tax that I pay down here in Oregon, sales tax that you pay up there in Washington State, gas tax, is taxes all over the place, and a lot of them do go for these infrastructure expenses. One thing that you can almost always count on, and this is definitely an issue here in the United States, there's some other parts of the world that face this as well, is a lot of our infrastructure tends to be old. Here in the United States, a lot of the infrastructure that we operate off of nowadays, a lot of it was built all the way back in the 1930s during the Great Depression, when our government our federal government was dumping a whole lot of money into creating jobs for a lot of Americans who were out of work because of the Great Depression. Well, if a bridge was built in the 1930s, yeah, it's 2022, and we might want to fix some of that stuff up. We've had some issues here recently trying to gather really the momentum among voters and government to be able to pay for it. It's very expensive. It's expensive, rebuilding roads. It's terribly expensive rebuilding bridges. And the bridge system that we have between Vancouver and Portland, especially going from downtown Vancouver into downtown Portland, those are some very old bridges, and definitely in need of either major improvement or just replacement. I'm always happy that at least going over 205 like I do every morning, I'm going over the river on a relatively newer bridge. I don't spend too much time wondering about, gee, what would happen if this thing collapsed? But that's the problem, is the expense, and then it's like, how much can you expect taxpayers to be able to to cough up? Because I mean, that's less money they have to pay for everything from housing to food to just keeping our economy going by buying stuff. And so those are some of the always big questions. Who pays and how much when it comes to the infrastructure question. All right. Another political issue in cities is trying to get those tax dollars. And typically, when it comes beyond the taxes they collect from individual taxpayers, a big way that cities make money is they tax businesses, okay? Restaurants, stores, all that sort of thing. And informal and shadow economy are terms that refer to parts of the business industry in any city that probably should be being taxed, but are not being taxed. It could be something as simple as kind of like you see the picture on the right side where it's like street markets and people who might be there, on a weekend, maybe selling produce or something that they make, some kind of a craft, but they're not there all the time. They're not in business. They've not incorporated. And so the money that they're making is what we sometimes refer to as kind of like under the table. It's not being regulated. It's not being taxed. They don't charge sales taxes. If you buy something from them, it's just usually it's just kind of, they're either it's an exchange of cash, or they've got a little swiper that they just hook to their smartphone, and boom, it's taken care of. Cities don't like that, because with every transaction, they're not getting tax dollars that they would like to be getting their hands on, so that they can invest into infrastructure and the other things that we expect a city to take care of for us. So whether it's illegal activity or whether it's just some of this informal economy that goes on, that's always a concern and an interest by city governments. All right. More problems in cities go the environmental route. And this just has to do with the very fact that, cities are full of people. And we people, just by the mere fact of us being people and being on the planet, we impact the natural environment, and usually in negative ways. Even when we're trying to be careful, even if we're, consider ourselves to be, really good recyclers and, that sort of thing, still our footprint always has an impact on the natural environment. Some of the examples of that would be urban canyons. If you look at that photograph over there on the right side, that's kind of from street level looking up. Those are all high-rise buildings, and you can see a little bit of sky up above there. And typically that means that you're going to have down at street level very little daylight. So there's not going to be anything really growing, even if you tried to create some little spaces, to grow some crops or some plants or just even some flowers. It's not going to work because there's just not enough daylight. There's not enough sun that gets in there. And then sometimes these urban canyons also can create almost their own kind of their own wind patterns through the buildings. And you can get these strange winds that will blow down through downtown areas that kind of have a life of their own. Other things mentioned there: urban flooding, and we see examples of that pretty much every winter or spring, where too much water and drainage systems in a city just cannot keep up with it, and you end up with flooding that takes place. Urban heat islands are the idea that a lot of times cities will kind of keep a lot of the heat being produced from just a lot of cars, a lot of business, sometimes maybe industry that's going on in there, and it kind of keeps it all. It creates like its own weather system almost, and a lot of times you will find that cities are going to be 5, 6, 7 degrees warmer than the actual real temperature because you end up with a kind of an air inversion system that traps that heat around a city. And it's kind of like it's just not your imagination. It feels a little warm around you. No, it is. Urban wildlife, another problem in cities. You do get certain kinds of critters that live off of lots of if there's garbage that's not being picked up on a regular basis or being taken care of properly. That's where you end up getting the spread of rats and raccoons. These are animals that sometimes are carrying disease, and so when they bump into humans and maybe there's a bite, that kind of a thing, you can end up with some rabies and some bad stuff like that going on. Talked about pigeons there, feral animals. That's if you end up with like wild cats or dogs that sometimes you'll find in some urban settings. And those are also problems that cities have to deal with and have to figure out how to get around. Pollution, which we've talked about already, but when we have kind of like that combination of smoke and fog, which we call smog, water runoff, polluted water, things like that going on, those cause pollution issues that are environmental in nature, and likewise issues that cities have to deal with. In more recent times, urban sprawl has become more and more of a problem, and you've got kind of like the definition for you right there, and it's kind of where you see that suburban area. The suburbs themselves just keep they kind of gain almost like a life of their own as they spread from the downtown area and begin to take over almost every square foot of available territory. You see the picture there, and I mean, those are all neighborhoods. Those are all neighborhoods of people trying to make life work for them, and that is an example of that kind of urban sprawl. And the downside to that, you look at that picture and it's like I'm not seeing any parks or anything in there. All I'm seeing is high density housing from one street to the next to the next, and that can cause some of those problems up above, like pollution. And so you got that going. All right, our very last section, we'll look at the future. All right, so sustainability. How do we keep things going in a more positive direction when it comes to the urban setting, the urban landscape, cities, towns, and all of that kind of business, right? Yes, the long-term viability of cities. How do we make sure that they don't just implode or die off? Well, let's take a look at some things that we have seen here in the United States and other parts of the world. So green belts and smart growth would be a couple examples, and like the picture you see there on the right side, you see where they've created these what we call green belts, and this is part of a smart growth plan. Where when a maybe area of neighborhoods is being developed from the ground up, I mean it's like it's untouched territory and it's going to be turned into neighborhoods for people to move into, is the idea that unlike that picture of urban sprawl I showed you, by design you create these green belts where you're going to have these stretches of land that are going to be left alone. Trees can grow in there, just the underbrush. I mean, it's going to be pretty much Mother Nature, as intended. And that is to help with everything from, creating the heat island to air quality by having some good old plants there and, creating that oxygen. And like the picture you see there, it looks like we have some maybe either some walking or bicycling trails that are through the green belt, and so you also have more of it's a better livability kind of a situation going on there, where people can go get some exercise and take a little walk through a little bit of Mother Nature there in the middle of all of these housing developments. Okay, that's what your green belts and smart growth are. And we could talk about those being examples of new urbanism. both of those, and that is this idea of what we call mixed use neighborhoods. Some of it is like you'll see, a mix of homes and businesses and nature. And the picture I put up there at the right side, kind of shows the way that we've typically gone about doing it, where there's not really a plan to it. It just kind of happens over time. You got a little bit of nature still left there. You got some homes, you got some businesses, and then the new urbanism version of it is what you have over here, where there's a little bit more thought going into it, and it does require pre-planning. But it does create then an environment where you've got these green spaces, you've got your homes and your businesses not completely, totally mixed in together, but easily accessible. And just this whole idea, mixed use, just like Planter's peanut guy over there. Anyhow, livable communities. All right. Urban infill, and your definition of what urban infill is right there. Sometimes you'll be kind of driving around a city and you see you'll go, God, what was that big empty lot in between those houses? What's that about? Well, now you know that's not a big empty lot. That's urban infill, all right? And urban infill is that idea of taking a look at that lot and saying, we could probably build a 2 or 3 story building on there. We could probably create a townhouse that would provide homes for 3, maybe 4 families, and using it that way, and maybe you build them in such a way so that it's a little bit more affordable housing for those families, that kind of a concept. All right. Another topic as we kind of look here, especially to the most recent past, but some people say is pointing toward the future, and that is exurbanism. And that is the idea of more and more people deciding that, as much as the city is probably, kind of cool to live in, and it's where all the nightlife is and all the restaurants and the music and the art and all that kind of thing, there's more people who are deciding, so what? I'm leaving. I'm out. And we definitely saw a lot of exurbanism during the pandemic, where a lot of people, it was almost kind of like even a health concern. It's like, in the middle of a pandemic, I don't want to be living elbow to elbow with a bunch of other people. I'm getting out of the big city. Exurbanism, also known as counter-urbanization or as deurbanization. There's pretty much 3 terms that all mean about the same thing. And it is this idea of people who are leaving cities for various reasons. Some of them, it has to do with they want a different culture that they want to live in. Increasingly, you're hearing some Americans saying it has to do with their political beliefs. Sometimes it has to do with, health concerns. There's all kinds of reasons, and then there's just good old economics. But a lot of reasons why you're seeing more and more people who are flowing away from the cities and heading to more, undeveloped or even kind of rural areas. The exurbs mentioned there, and that's what we're starting to see a little bit more of in kind of from place to place, where kind of beyond a city into what we'd usually characterize as the rural area, that actually we're starting to see some of these nicer neighborhoods pop up out a little bit more in the rural areas and, out beyond the suburbs. And that's what we refer to as the exurbs, is these nice parts of town, nice housing. It's probably not affordable housing. It's probably going to be a little more expensive, but you also experience a little bit more of that, the feeling of living in the countryside kind of a thing. All right. And then to wrap things up, some other trends we've been seeing. I know I see these all over the place down in Portland, and that is the idea of pedestrian zones, some streets that are blocked off, sometimes just on the weekends, some that are being permanently blocked off and creating these pedestrian areas where, you can walk around and you have to worry about a car or a truck mowing you down. Usually these are in business districts where there's like lots of restaurants, maybe little shops, that kind of thing. Also, bicycle lanes where road space available to cars is being narrowed down and creating more space to try to encourage people to shift over to bicycling to get to work and get from place to place. That has definitely been a strong initiative down in the Portland area over about the last 15, maybe 20 years. And one that's kind of controversial. You have a lot of people who, just pretty much say, hey, I live in Portland like me and, and work in Vancouver. I can't bicycle. It's just not practical. and yet, it's getting harder for me to get around from place to place because roadways are being, lanes of travel for cars are being narrowed down or reduced to make more space for bicycles. And other people saying, well, your car is polluting and the bicycle is healthier for you anyway, so stop your whining and buy a bike. I don't know. It's definitely a kind of a debate that goes back and forth here in the Portland area, I know for sure. Running paths, community gardens, yes, these are other things that we've seen a little bit more of in more recent times to try to improve just kind of the livability in some of our urban areas and to try to maintain some of that sustainability and kind of creating a nice kind of a vibrant environment to be able to live in. And so we'll describe a few examples of some of those urban trends. All right, kablam, there we go. That gets us into Unit 6. Yes, only one left. And it's going to go fast, kids. I think I'm probably going to end up putting most of Unit 7 onto video, just so we have it for backup for those of you that are going to be gone for soccer, for track. Yeah, sixth period, I fear that we may be suffering significantly over here over the next couple of weeks. Perfect timing, just heading into test time, but we'll make it work one way or the other, gang. All right, we always do. But that'll cover us for Unit 6. Thanks. See ya in class.